The dust cloud rose behind Teresa Zimmerman's wagon just before the axle cracked with a sound like a gunshot, sending her lurching forward against the wooden seat as the whole contraption tilted sickeningly to one side. She pulled hard on the reins, bringing her mare to a stop on the rutted trail that stretched endlessly through the Nevada desert, the late afternoon sun of 1873 beating down without mercy. Her heart hammered as she climbed down carefully, her boots sinking into the sandy soil as she assessed the damage. The right rear wheel sat at an impossible angle, the axle splintered clean through. Teresa stood there in her dusty traveling dress, looking around at the vast emptiness surrounding her. She had left Piotr that morning, heading toward the small homestead her late father had left her, determined to start fresh after his death 3 months prior. Now she was stranded miles from anywhere, with nothing but sagebrush and rocky outcroppings for company. The sun would set in a few hours, and the desert night would bring cold that could freeze a person solid. She tried not to panic. Her father had taught her to keep her head in difficult situations, but he had also taught her basic wagon maintenance, and she knew this was beyond her ability to repair alone. She did not have the tools, the spare wood, or the strength to lift the wagon enough to even attempt a fix. Her water supply was adequate for another day, maybe 2 if she rationed carefully, but that would not help if she could not move. Teresa was just considering whether to unhitch her mare and try riding bareback to find help when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction she had come. She turned, one hand instinctively moving to the small pistol her father had given her, tucked into the pocket of her dress. A lone rider appeared over a rise, sitting easy in the saddle on a large buckskin horse. He slowed when he spotted her, and she kept her hand near her weapon, knowing that a woman alone in the desert was vulnerable to all manner of dangers. The rider came closer, and Teresa could see he was a young man, probably not much older than her own 22 years. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his hat pulled low against the sun, his face shadowed but his posture relaxed. He stopped his horse a respectful distance away and pushed his hat back, revealing dark eyes that assessed her situation quickly. "Looks like you have got trouble, miss," he said, his voice low and even. He swung down from his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. "The axle broke," Teresa said, keeping her voice steady. "I was heading to my father's homestead about 10 miles west of here." The cowboy walked over to her wagon, crouching down to examine the damage. He let out a low whistle. "That is a clean break. You hit something. Just a rut in the trail. It must have been weaker than it looked." He stood up, brushing dust from his hands. Now that he was closer, Teresa could see him more clearly. He had strong features, weathered by sun and wind, and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were kind, which she noted with relief. She had met plenty of men whose eyes held nothing but calculation and greed. "I am Kade Xavier," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I work at a ranch about 5 miles north of here. I have got tools and timber back home that could fix this, but it will take some doing. This is not something I can repair on the trail." Teresa felt her stomach sink. "I do not have much money to pay you." Kade shook his head. "I was not asking for payment. A person does not leave someone stranded in the desert, not if they have any decency." He looked at the sky, calculating. "We have got maybe 3 hours of good light left. I can ride back, get my wagon and supplies and come back, but that will put us working in the dark. Or—" He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. "Or," Teresa prompted, "or you could follow me home. I can fix it proper there in daylight with all the tools I need. You would have a place to sleep tonight, a hot meal. My sister lives with me, so it would be proper. Then tomorrow I can get you on your way." Teresa studied him carefully. Everything about him seemed honest, from his straightforward manner to the way he met her eyes without any hint of impropriety. But she had been raised to be cautious, especially of men she did not know. "Your sister lives with you?" she asked. "Kate. She is 16, been keeping house for me since our parents passed 2 years back. We run a small horse ranch, just the two of us and a couple of hands who come by during branding season." The mention of his sister made the offer more acceptable. Teresa looked at her broken wagon, then at the vast empty desert around them. She did not have many options, and night was coming. "How do we get the wagon to your ranch if the axle is broken?" she asked practically. Kade walked around the wagon again, thinking. "We will have to leave it here for tonight. I will help you load whatever you cannot leave onto my horse, and you can ride your mare. Tomorrow I will come back with my work wagon and tow yours to the ranch to fix it proper." It was not ideal, but it made sense. Teresa nodded slowly. "All right, but I want to make clear that I expect to pay you for your work, Mr. Xavier, even if it is in trade goods or work. I do not accept charity." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "Fair enough. We can settle accounts after the work is done." They spent the next 30 minutes unloading her most essential belongings. Teresa had packed light, knowing she would be setting up a homestead with limited resources. Her clothes, her father's rifle and pistol, a few cooking implements, and a small chest containing her mother's jewelry and her parents' wedding photograph. Kade tied everything securely onto his horse with practiced efficiency, then helped her unhitch her mare. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I can manage," Teresa said. She had ridden as a girl, though it had been a few years. She was grateful she had worn her more practical traveling dress, rather than something with excessive skirts. Kade gave her a boost up onto the mare, then swung easily onto his own horse despite the added weight of her belongings. "It is not a hard ride, but we need to keep a steady pace to get there before full dark. You let me know if you need to slow down." Teresa nodded, gathering her reins. Her mare seemed calm enough, which was a relief. They set off north, leaving the trail and heading across open desert. Kade navigated confidently, clearly knowing every rock and wash in this country. Teresa focused on staying in the saddle, feeling muscles she had not used in years protesting the movement. But she kept quiet, not wanting to show weakness. As they rode, Kade spoke occasionally, pointing out landmarks. "That rock formation there, we call it the Three Sisters, and if you look north you can just see the mountains where the ranch sits at the base. We have got good water there, a spring that never runs dry, even in the worst summers." "How long have you had the ranch?" Teresa asked. "My father started it about 15 years ago. He was a cowboy who saved his wages and bought the land cheap. It was rough country that nobody else wanted, but he saw the potential. Built it up slow and steady. When he and my mother died of fever, Kate and I kept it going. It is not much, but it is ours free and clear, no debt to any bank." There was pride in his voice, and Teresa understood it. In this country, owning your own land was everything. "I am sorry about your parents," she said. "I am sorry about your father. You said this was his homestead you were heading to." "Yes. He filed his claim 5 years ago, built a small cabin. He would go there sometimes, planning for the future. He worked in the mines in Piach mostly, saving up to stock the place properly. He always said when he had enough saved, we would move out there full-time, raise some cattle and horses. But then there was an accident in the mine last spring." Her voice caught slightly, and she cleared her throat. She had cried enough for her father. Now was the time to be strong, to make his dream real even though he could not be there to see it. "Mining is hard, dangerous work," Kade said quietly. "A lot of good men lost to it. They rode in silence for a while after that. The sun was getting lower, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. Despite the circumstances, Teresa found herself appreciating the beauty of this harsh land. There was something honest about the desert, something clean and straightforward that appealed to her. As the sun touched the horizon, buildings came into view. The ranch was small but well-maintained, with a sturdy barn, a house that looked like it had been added onto over the years, and several corrals. Teresa could see horses in one of the corrals, their coats gleaming in the fading light. A dog started barking as they approached, and a young girl came out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Kade, you are late," she called out, then stopped when she saw Teresa. "Oh, Kate, this is Miss Teresa Zimmerman. Her wagon broke down on the trail. She will be staying the night, and tomorrow I will help her get it fixed." Kate was a pretty girl with the same dark eyes as her brother, her hair pulled back in a practical braid. She looked surprised but not unfriendly. "Of course. I will set another place at the table. Supper is almost ready." Kate dismounted and came to help Teresa down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, stiff from the unaccustomed ride. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, his touch brief and respectful. "You did well. Not many city folk can handle that ride without complaining." "I am not really a city person," Teresa said, finding her balance. "I grew up in mining camps and small towns." "Even better," Kade said with a slight smile. "Kate, can you help Miss Zimmerman get settled while I see to the horses?" "Of course. Come on inside, Miss Zimmerman. You must be exhausted." Teresa followed Kate into the house, which was simple but clean. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy table in the center. Doors led off to what must be bedrooms. "You can wash up if you like," Kate said, pointing to a basin and pitcher. "The water is fresh from this morning, and I will show you the guest room. It is not much, just a small space, but the bed is comfortable." "I am very grateful for your hospitality," Teresa said sincerely. Kate smiled, warming up. "It is nice to have another woman here. It gets lonely sometimes with just Kade and the hands when they come by. He said your wagon broke." As Teresa washed the dust from her face and hands, she told Kate about the broken axle. Kate listened sympathetically, bustling around to finish preparing supper. "Kade is good with repairs. If anyone can fix your wagon, he can. He built half this house himself, and he can work metal and wood both. Our father taught him everything." The pride in her voice was clear. Teresa found herself warming to the girl, who seemed genuinely kind rather than just polite. Kade came in a few minutes later, having stabled the horses and brought in Teresa's belongings. He had washed up at the pump outside, his hair damp and slicked back. The three of them sat down to a simple but hearty meal of stew and fresh bread. Teresa realized she had not eaten since early morning and was ravenous. "This is delicious," she said to Kate, who beamed at the compliment. "Kade shot the deer 2 days ago. The meat is still fresh." They ate mostly in comfortable silence, the kind that came from people who worked hard and appreciated a hot meal. After supper, Kate refused Teresa's offer to help with the dishes. "You have had a long day. Kade will show you to your room and you should rest. Tomorrow we'll come early around here." The guest room was indeed small, barely larger than the narrow bed and a simple chest of drawers, but it was clean and the bed looked inviting. Kade set her belongings down carefully. "I will head out at first light to get your wagon. If you want to sleep in, that is fine. Kate will make sure you get breakfast whenever you wake." "I am used to early mornings," Teresa said. "I would like to come with you if that is all right. I want to see how you fix it. My father taught me that it is good to learn useful skills." Kade looked surprised but pleased. Most women would not want to spend their morning watching wagon repair. "I am not most women," Teresa said simply. He studied her for a moment, something thoughtful in his expression. "No, I am starting to see that. All right then. We leave at dawn." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Teresa found herself thinking about Kade Xavier. He was different from the men she had known in the mining towns, the rough men who spent their wages on whiskey and cards. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet competence that she found reassuring. And he was handsome, though she told herself that was hardly relevant. She was here because her wagon broke, nothing more. Tomorrow he would fix it, and she would continue to her father's homestead. Their paths would likely never cross again. But as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself hoping that perhaps they might. Dawn came cold and clear. Teresa woke to the sound of someone moving around in the main room and got dressed quickly. Her traveling dress was wrinkled and dusty, but it would have to do. She braided her dark hair back from her face and went out to find Kate already cooking breakfast and Kade drinking coffee at the table. "Good morning," Teresa said. Kade stood politely. "Morning. Coffee, please." He poured her a cup and she wrapped her hands around it gratefully. The house was warm from the fire, but she could see frost on the windows. "Gets cold at night this time of year," Kate said, setting plates of eggs and bacon on the table. "Kade says you are going with him to get your wagon, if that is still all right." "It is fine by me," Kade said. "I brought the work wagon around already. Soon as we eat, we can head out." They ate quickly, and Teresa helped Kate clear the dishes despite the girls' protests. Then she followed Kade outside into the crisp morning air. The work wagon was a sturdy affair, built for hauling heavy loads, pulled by two strong draft horses. Kade helped her up onto the seat, then climbed up beside her. The ride back to where her wagon sat stranded was quiet, both of them watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of pink and gold. In daylight, the country looked less harsh, more beautiful. When they reached her wagon, Kade spent a long time examining the break, taking measurements with a piece of string and making marks on a scrap of wood with a pencil stub. Teresa watched carefully, asking questions about what he was doing and why. He answered patiently, explaining the process. "The hard part will be lifting it enough to slide the old axle out and the new one in," he said. "But I brought a jack and some blocking. It will take some time, but we can manage it." "What can I do to help?" He looked at her appraisingly. "You really want to help? I am stronger than I look, and I do not like standing around being useless." "All right then. First we need to get your wagon unhitched from everything and ready to move. Then we will use my horses to pull it back to the ranch on its good wheels while we support the broken side with chains." It was tricky, precise work, but Kade moved with confidence, explaining each step. Teresa did what she could, holding chains steady, positioning blocks where he directed, learning as they went. By mid-morning, they had her wagon secured and were slowly making their way back to the ranch, the broken wheel lifted clear of the ground. "You have got a good mind for this kind of work," Kade said as they walked alongside the wagons, monitoring the load. "Most people cannot think through the mechanics of it. My father was good at explaining things. He said understanding how things work gives you power over your circumstances." Smart man. Back at the ranch, Kade had a workspace set up near the barn with proper tools and a good supply of seasoned timber. He selected a piece of oak and began the process of shaping a new axle. Teresa watched, fascinated, as he measured and cut and planed the wood with sure, practiced movements. Kate came out midday with sandwiches and cold water. She sat with them in the shade, chattering about the neighbors and local gossip. Teresa learned that the nearest ranch was 5 miles east, run by a family named Parker with 6 children. The closest town was a small settlement called Jackrabbit Springs, about 8 miles south, with a general store, a saloon, and a church that a traveling preacher visited once a month. "Do you go to town often?" Teresa asked. "Once a month or so for supplies," Kate said. "Sometimes more if we need something special." Kade does not like town much. He says it is full of fools and drunks. "It is," Kade said mildly, not looking up from his work. "Present company excluded, of course." Kate laughed and rolled her eyes at Teresa. "He is too serious sometimes. I keep telling him he needs to get out more, maybe meet a nice girl." Kade's ears went slightly red and Teresa hid a smile. Kate noticed and grinned. "See, now he is embarrassed, but it is true. He works too hard and never has any fun." "Kate, do not you have something to do in the house?" Kade asked pointedly. "Probably," she said cheerfully, standing up. "But this is much more interesting. Still, I suppose I should start thinking about supper." "Will you be staying another night, Miss Zimmerman? That axle looks like it will take most of the day." Kade paused in his work. "It will be done by this evening, but it will need to cure overnight before it is safe to take a full load. And honestly, it would be better to test it here first, make sure it holds before you head out into the desert again." It made sense, but Teresa hesitated. "I do not want to impose on your hospitality any longer than necessary." "It is not an imposition," Kate said firmly. "We like having you here." "Do not we, Kade? You are welcome to stay as long as you need," Kade said, his tone neutral but his eyes sincere when they met hers. "Then I accept with thanks," Teresa said. "And I insist on helping Kate with the housework to earn my keep." "Oh, that would be wonderful," Kate said enthusiastically. "There is mending I have been putting off, and if you know how to make bread, I would love to learn. Mine never rises properly." So it was settled. Teresa spent the afternoon divided between watching Kade work on the axle and helping Kate in the house. She found herself enjoying both activities. Kade was good company, talking easily about the ranch and the country when she asked questions, falling into comfortable silence when concentration was needed. And Kate was delightful, chattering away about everything and nothing, clearly thrilled to have another woman to talk to. By evening, the new axle was shaped and fitted, coated in linseed oil to help it cure. Kade pronounced himself satisfied with the work. "We will let it sit overnight, then install it in the morning. By afternoon, you should be able to test it with a light load. If it holds, you can be on your way the next day." There was something in his voice that Teresa could not quite identify. Not reluctance exactly, but perhaps a hint of regret that their time together was ending. Or maybe she was imagining it, projecting her own surprising reluctance onto him. That night after supper, they sat around the fireplace. Kate worked on her mending while Kade cleaned his tools, and Teresa helped prepare vegetables for the next day's meals. It felt domestic and comfortable in a way that surprised her. She had been so focused on getting to her father's homestead and starting her new life that she had not realized how lonely she had been since his death. "Tell us about your homestead," Kate said. "What is it like?" "I have only been there once, about 2 years ago." "It is small, just a one-room cabin with a lean-to for animals. There is a stream nearby, and my father chose the spot because it has good grazing land. He had planned to start with a few cattle, maybe some chickens." "Will you be there alone?" Kate asked, then blushed. "I am sorry. That is not my business." "It is all right. Yes, I will be alone. I have enough supplies to last a few months, and I plan to plant a garden come spring. There is a root cellar my father dug. I am hoping to buy some chickens from a neighbor if I can find one close by." Kade looked up from his work. "That is hard country for a woman alone. I know, but it is mine and it was my father's dream. I owe it to him to try." "What if something happens? What if you get sick or hurt?" Teresa met his eyes steadily. "Then I will deal with it as best I can." "What other choice do I have?" He looked like he wanted to say more but stopped himself. Kate watched them both with interest, her eyes moving between them like she was watching a chess game. Later, lying in bed, Teresa found herself thinking about what would happen when she left. Part of her had already started imagining a different life, one where she stayed nearby, where she might see Kade and Kate regularly. But that was foolish. She had a plan, a place to go. She could not let herself be distracted just because a handsome cowboy had been kind to her. Still, when she finally slept, she dreamed of dark eyes and sure hands and a voice that made her feel safe. The next morning dawned bright and clear. After breakfast, Kade and Teresa worked together to install the new axle. The process required careful measurement and considerable strength. Teresa held pieces steady while Kade worked, fetched tools when needed, and learned more about wagon construction than she had ever expected to know. By noon, the axle was installed and the wheel remounted. Kade walked around the wagon several times, checking every joint and connection. "Looks solid," he pronounced. "Let's load it light and take it for a test run. Just around the ranch at first, then maybe out a mile or so if it holds." They loaded some hay bales into the wagon for weight and hitched Teresa's mare to it. The first few turns around the yard went smoothly, the wheel rolling true with no wobble or strange sounds. Encouraged, they headed out onto the open land, going slowly at first, then gradually picking up speed. "It is holding well," Kade said, satisfaction clear in his voice. "That oak is strong. Should last you for years if you take care of it." They returned to the ranch, and Kade insisted on checking the wheel again. "Everything still looks good. I think it is safe to say you can travel tomorrow if you want." Teresa nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. "Then I will leave first thing in the morning. I have taken enough of your time." "You have not been any trouble," Kade said, his eyes on the wheel as he made one final check. "In fact, it has been nice having you here." Before Teresa could respond, Kate came running from the house. "Riders coming." "3 of them." Kade straightened immediately, his whole demeanor changing. Teresa saw his hand move instinctively toward the gun at his hip before he seemed to relax slightly. "It is all right. I know them." 3 men rode into the yard, dusty from travel. The one in front was older, maybe 50, with a weathered face and sharp blue eyes. The other 2 were younger, one about Kade's age and another who looked barely 20. "Xavier," the older man said, dismounting, "we are tracking some horses that went missing from our place 2 nights ago." "6 head, you seen anything?" "Nothing, Mr. Parker. When did you notice them gone?" "Yesterday morning. Gate was left open and they wandered off. We have been following tracks, but they are scattered. Thought they might have come this way for your water." Kade shook his head. "I would have noticed 6 horses, but I will keep an eye out. They might show up yet." Parker's eyes had moved to Teresa, his expression curious but not unfriendly. "Madam." "This is Miss Zimmerman," Kade said. "Her wagon broke down and I have been helping her repair it." "Pleased to meet you," Parker said, tipping his hat. "You are welcome to stop by our place if you need anything. We are about 5 miles east. My wife is always happy to see a new face." "Thank you," Teresa said. "That is kind of you." The men stayed for a few minutes more, accepting water for themselves and their horses. The younger Parker, who Kate whispered was named James, kept looking at Teresa with obvious interest until his father gave him a sharp look. Then they rode out, continuing their search. "Good neighbors," Kade said as they watched the men disappear into the distance. "Known the Parkers since we moved here. Honest people." That afternoon, Kate taught Teresa her method for making biscuits, which Teresa had to admit were far superior to her own. In return, Teresa showed Kate how to make a stew her mother had taught her, rich and flavorful with wild herbs. They worked well together, laughing and talking, and Teresa realized she was going to miss this when she left. At supper, the mood was quieter than previous nights. Everyone seemed aware that this was Teresa's last evening with them. Kate kept starting sentences and stopping, like she wanted to say something but could not find the words. Kade was even more quiet than usual, focusing on his food with unusual intensity. Finally, Kate burst out. "Do you have to leave tomorrow? Could not you stay a few more days? Just to be sure the wagon is really fixed, Kate," Kade said gently. "Miss Zimmerman has her own place to get to. She cannot stay here indefinitely just because we enjoy her company. But she could visit sometimes, could not she? Her homestead is only 10 miles from here. That is not far." Teresa felt her heart warm at Kate's obvious distress at her leaving. "I would like that very much, and you would both be welcome to visit me once I get settled." "Really?" Kate's face brightened. "Of course. I have a feeling I am going to need all the friends I can get out here." After supper, Kade asked if Teresa would like to see the horses before dark. She agreed, and they walked out to the corrals together, Kate staying behind to clean up. The horses were beautiful animals, well cared for and clearly accustomed to human company. Several came to the fence when Kade whistled, and he fed them treats from his pockets while telling Teresa about their bloodlines and temperaments. "I breed them mostly for ranch work," he said. "Sturdy, smart, good stamina. But I have got one mare with racing blood that I am hoping will produce something special when I breed her next spring." He pointed out a sleek bay mare who stood apart from the others, watching them with intelligent eyes. "She is beautiful," Teresa said. "She is something special, all right. Temperamental, though. Took me 6 months to earn her trust. Sounds like she was worth the effort." "The best things usually are." He said it casually, but when Teresa looked at him, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the evening air cool around them and the last light painting everything in soft colors. "Teresa," Kade said, and it was the first time he had used her first name. "I know you have got plans, a place you need to be. But I want you to know that if you ever need help, for any reason, you can come here. Kate and we would be glad to assist you however we can." "Thank you," Teresa said softly. "That means more than you know. And I hope you meant it about visiting. I would like to see you again. To make sure you are doing all right out there." His meaning was clear beyond just the words he was saying. Teresa felt her pulse quicken. "I would like that too," she admitted. "Very much." Kade smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Good, that is good." They stood there a moment longer, something unspoken but understood passing between them. Then Kate called from the house that she had made coffee, and the moment broke, though the warmth of it stayed with Teresa as they walked back. That night, Teresa lay awake for a long time, her mind spinning. Tomorrow she would leave and continue to her father's homestead. It was what she had planned, what she needed to do. But now the thought of leaving felt different. She was not just leaving a place where she had found temporary shelter. She was leaving people who had become important to her in just a few short days. Especially Kade. She tried to tell herself she was being ridiculous. She barely knew him. But there was something about him that called to her, something steady and true that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. And the way he had looked at her tonight, she was fairly certain he felt something too. Morning came too quickly. Teresa dressed and packed her few belongings, checking to make sure she had everything. Kate had risen early to make a special breakfast, and the meal was delicious but subdued. No one seemed to want to acknowledge that Teresa was leaving. Finally, it could be put off no longer. Kade and Teresa went out to hitch her mare to the wagon while Kate packed a basket of food for Teresa's journey. "You have got about 2 hours of travel ahead of you," Kade said as he checked the harness. "The trail is pretty straightforward, but I drew you a map just in case." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I marked our place and yours and the Parkers' ranch too. and Jackrabbit Springs in case you need supplies. Teresa took the map, their fingers brushing briefly. Thank you for everything. I do not know what I would have done if you had not come along when you did. I am just glad I was there, Kade said. He hesitated, then added, I meant what I said last night. If you need anything, you send word. I can be to your place in under an hour if I ride hard. I will remember that. Kate came running out with the basket, her eyes red like she had been crying. I packed extra biscuits and some of that stew we made yesterday, and some preserves my mother made before she died. She would have wanted you to have them. Teresa hugged the girl impulsively. Thank you, Kate. You have been so kind to me. You will visit, will not you? Promise me you will visit. I promise. As soon as I get settled, I will come by, and you must come see me too. Kate nodded, wiping at her eyes. She stepped back to stand by her brother, and they both watched as Teresa climbed up onto her wagon seat. The mare seemed fresh and ready to go, and the wagon felt solid beneath her, the new axle holding firm. Teresa picked up the reins, then paused and looked back at Kade. He stood with his hat pushed back, the morning sun on his face, and she tried to memorize the sight of him. I will see you soon, she said, making it a promise. You will, he agreed. Count on it. She clicked to the mare and started forward, following the trail Kade had pointed out. After a few hundred yards, she looked back. They were still standing there watching her, Kate waving. Kade raised his hand in farewell, and Teresa waved back before turning her attention to the road ahead. The journey to her father's homestead was uneventful. The wagon held together perfectly, the new axle strong and true. Following Kade's map, Teresa found the landmarks easily and reached her destination just as the sun reached its peak. The cabin was just as she remembered it, small and sturdy, built from logs her father had cut and hauled himself. The roof needed some work, and the door hung slightly crooked, but it was sound. The lean-to stood ready for animals she did not yet have. The stream ran clear and cold nearby, and the land rolled away in gentle swells, covered in prairie grass that would be good for grazing. Teresa unhitched her mare and led her to the stream to drink, then tied her in the lean-to with enough rope to reach both water and grass. Then she started unloading her wagon, carrying her belongings into the cabin. Inside, everything was dusty but intact. Her father's cot still stood in one corner, a simple table and 2 chairs he had made in the center, a pot-bellied stove against one wall. There were shelves for supplies and pegs for hanging things. It was crude but functional. She spent the rest of the day cleaning and organizing, hanging blankets over the windows until she could make proper curtains, sweeping out dust and mouse droppings, checking the stove to make sure it still worked. By evening, the place looked almost habitable. She made a simple meal from Kate's provisions and ate while watching the sun set through the open door. The silence was profound. Teresa was used to noise, the constant sounds of a mining town or the comfortable bustle of the Xavier ranch. Here, there was nothing but wind and the occasional call of a bird. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt lonely. She told herself she would adjust. This was her new life, the independence she had wanted. She just needed time to adapt. But that night, lying on her father's cot and listening to the vast silence, Teresa found herself thinking about the warm kitchen at the Xavier ranch, Kate's cheerful chatter, and Kade's steady presence. She had been there less than 3 days, but somehow it had felt more like home than anywhere since her father died. The next few days were busy. Teresa had plenty to do, and she threw herself into the work. She patched the roof where it leaked, repaired the door so it hung straight, and organized her supplies. She explored the property, finding the boundaries her father had marked and checking on the grassland. She saw pronghorn in the distance and rabbits closer to the cabin. signs of life that meant she could hunt if needed. On the fourth day, she decided to visit the Parkers. She needed to start making connections with her neighbors, and they had seemed friendly when she met them at Kade's place. Following the landmarks on Kade's map, she found their ranch without difficulty. The Parker place was larger than the Xavier ranch, with multiple buildings and extensive corrals. Several children of various ages were visible working at different tasks. When Teresa drove her wagon into the yard, a woman came out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Hello there," the woman called out warmly. "You must be Miss Zimmerman. My husband told me about meeting you. I am Margaret Parker." She was a stout woman with graying hair and a friendly, open face. Teresa liked her immediately. "Please call me Teresa. I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all. We are always happy to see a new face. Come in, come in. I just took a pie out of the oven." The Parker house was large and noisy, full of children and activity. Margaret introduced Teresa to her 6 children, ranging from James, whom Teresa had already met, down to a little girl of about 6. They were polite but curious, clearly not used to seeing many visitors. Over pie and coffee, Teresa explained her situation. Margaret listened sympathetically. "Your father's old place. I remember when he built that cabin. Fine man, your father. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. It will be hard work running that place alone. Have you thought about getting some help? There are usually men looking for work, especially coming into winter." "I do not really have the money to hire help," Teresa admitted. "I am hoping to manage on my own at least for the first year." Margaret looked doubtful but did not argue. "Well, you are welcome here anytime, and if you need anything, you just ask. That is how we do things out here. We help each other. Actually, I was hoping I might be able to buy some chickens from you if you have any to spare. I need to start building up livestock." "Of course. I have got plenty. You can take a dozen for a fair price. James can load them in your wagon when you leave." They talked for another hour, Margaret filling Teresa in on all the local families and the area politics. Apparently, there was tension between some of the ranchers and the remaining miners over water rights, and the territorial governor had been making noises about new regulations. It was all useful information, the kind of local knowledge Teresa needed. When she finally left, it was with a crate of chickens in her wagon and an invitation to come back anytime. Margaret had also given her seeds for a spring garden and some cuttings from her herbs. "You stopped by the Xavier place on your way home," Margaret said as Teresa was leaving. "Kate was telling me you stayed with them. She is a sweet girl and Kade is a good man. He has been alone too long, if you ask me. Needs a wife." Teresa felt her face heat up. "I hardly know them." Margaret gave her a knowing look. "That can change, and you are going to need friends out here, dear. The Xaviers are good people to have as friends." The suggestion stayed with Teresa as she drove home. She had promised to visit, and it would be neighborly to stop by and let them know she had settled in all right. It had nothing to do with wanting to see Kade again, she told herself unconvincingly. But when she reached the turnoff to the Xavier ranch, she kept going. It had only been 4 days. She did not want to seem too eager, too needy. She needed to prove to herself that she could manage on her own first. The chickens were a good addition to the homestead. Teresa built them a rough coop attached to the lean-to, and scattered the seeds Margaret had given her in a fenced area that would become her garden. She fell into a routine, rising at dawn to tend the animals and work on improving the property, cooking simple meals, falling into bed exhausted each night. It was a good life, the life she had planned. But she could not shake the loneliness, the sense that something was missing. 2 weeks after leaving the Xavier ranch, Teresa woke to find frost thick on the ground and her water bucket frozen solid. Winter was coming earlier than she had expected. She would need more firewood, more supplies. The food Kate had given her was almost gone, and she was running low on other essentials. She hitched her mare to the wagon and headed for Jackrabbit Springs. The town was small, just a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads. The general store was run by an elderly Chinese man who spoke excellent English and carried a surprising variety of goods. Teresa bought flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples, as well as ammunition for her rifle and some nails and other hardware for repairs around the homestead. As she was loading her wagon, a man approached her. He was perhaps 30, well-dressed by frontier standards with a confident manner that bordered on arrogant. "Afternoon, miss. I do not believe we have met. I am Daniel Morris. I own a ranch about 15 miles north of here." "Teresa Zimmerman," she said politely, continuing to load her supplies. "Zimmerman. That would be old Carl Zimmerman's daughter. I heard you had taken over his place. That is rough country for a woman alone. So I have been told. I have been thinking about expanding my operation. I would be interested in buying that land from you if you are interested in selling. I would give you a fair price." Teresa straightened up, giving him her full attention. "I am not interested in selling, Mr. Morris. I plan to work the land myself. Now, be reasonable. A woman cannot run a ranch alone. You will be struggling through winter, and come spring you will be no better off. Why not sell now, take the money, and start fresh somewhere easier?" His tone was patronizing, and Teresa felt her temper rise. "I appreciate your interest, but my answer is no." "The land is not for sale." Morris's eyes hardened. "You are making a mistake. That offer might not stand come spring when you have realized how hard this is. Then I will live with my mistake. Good day, Mr. Morris." She climbed onto her wagon and drove away, leaving him standing there looking annoyed. The encounter left a bad taste in her mouth. She had a feeling Morris was not the type to give up easily. The incident was still bothering her when she reached home. As she unloaded her supplies, she found herself thinking about Kade's offer of help, but she was determined to prove she could manage on her own. She could not go running to him every time something went wrong. That night, a storm blew in. Wind howled around the cabin and rain pounded on the roof. Teresa discovered several leaks she had not found before, and spent hours repositioning pots and buckets to catch the drips. The chickens huddled in their coop, and her mare whinnied nervously in the lean-to. Teresa checked on her frequently, worried the structure might not hold up to the wind. By morning, the storm had passed, but the damage was evident. Part of the roof needed more extensive repairs than Teresa could manage alone, and the lean-to had lost some boards. She spent the day doing what she could, but she knew she needed help. She lasted 3 more days before admitting defeat. She needed to see Kade, not just because she missed him, though she did, but because she genuinely needed his help. There was no shame in asking, she told herself. That was what neighbors did. The morning she decided to visit the Xavier ranch, she took extra care with her appearance, changing into her best dress and braiding her hair neatly. She told herself it was just being presentable, nothing more. The ride to the ranch felt both endless and too short. As she drove into the yard, she saw Kade working near the barn. He looked up at the sound of her wagon, and his face split into a genuine smile that made her heart skip. "Teresa," he said, striding over. "I was wondering when you would visit. Kade has been asking about you constantly." "I am sorry it took so long. I have been getting settled. How is the homestead?" "Everything working out all right," she hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Mostly. But I had some storm damage that I could use help with if you have time. I hate to ask, but of course I will help." "What do you need?" Before she could answer, Kate came running from the house, squealing with delight. "Teresa, you came. I have missed you so much. Come inside, you have to tell me everything." Teresa found herself swept into the house, Kate chattering a mile a minute. It felt like coming home, the warmth and welcome of it wrapping around her like a blanket. Over coffee and Kate's improved biscuits, Teresa told them about settling into the homestead, meeting the Parkers and the storm damage. She also mentioned Daniel Morris's offer to buy her land. Kade's expression darkened. Morris is trouble. He has been buying up land around here for years, and he is not always particular about how he gets people to sell. You watch yourself around him. He seemed persistent. He is. If he bothers you again, let me know. The protectiveness in his voice sent a warm flutter through Teresa's chest. After coffee, Kade got his tools together. I will follow you back to your place, see what needs fixing. Kate, I will be back by dark. Take your time, Kate said with a knowing smile. I am sure you will have lots of work to do. The ride back to her homestead with Kade following in his wagon felt different than when Teresa had made the journey alone. She found herself anticipating showing him what she had accomplished, wanting his approval even though she knew she should not care so much about his opinion. When they arrived, Kade spent time walking around the property, examining everything with a critical but not unkind eye. You have done good work here. The coop is well built and you have cleared a good spot for the garden, but you are right about the roof and the lean-to. Those need proper repair before the next storm. They worked together through the afternoon. Kade did the heavy work on the roof while Teresa handed up tools and materials, then helped him reinforce the lean-to. He worked with the same quiet competence she remembered, explaining what he was doing and why. Teresa found herself watching him sometimes, admiring the way he moved, the sureness of his hands. By late afternoon, the repairs were complete. Kade climbed down from the roof and surveyed his work with satisfaction. That should hold you through winter, but you are going to need more firewood. A lot more if you plan to stay warm. I have been cutting what I can. It is not enough. I will bring a load over from my place. I cut extra every year. Kade, I cannot keep accepting help without paying you. He looked at her seriously. This is not about payment, Teresa. This is what neighbors do. You would do the same for me if I needed it, would not you? Of course, but then that is settled. I will bring the wood by tomorrow. They stood there looking at each other, and Teresa felt the air between them charged with something unspoken. Kade took a step closer. I have been thinking about you, he said quietly. These past weeks, wondering how you were doing, if you were all right out here alone. I have been thinking about you too, Teresa admitted, more than I probably should. Why should not you? Because I barely know you. Because I just met you. Because I am supposed to be focused on building my life here, not. She trailed off, unsure how to finish. Not what? Kade prompted gently. Not getting distracted by a handsome cowboy who fixes my wagon and builds me a roof. Kade smiled, a slow, warm smile. Handsome, am I? Teresa felt her face heat. You know you are. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. For what it is worth, I think you are beautiful, and strong, and braver than most men I know, coming out here alone to make a life for yourself. His hand lingered near her face, and Teresa found herself leaning into the touch. Then Kade seemed to catch himself, stepping back. I should head back before dark, but I will see you tomorrow with that firewood. Teresa nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him climb onto his wagon and drive away, her heart pounding. Something had shifted between them today, something that could not be taken back. And despite her determination to be independent, she could not bring herself to regret it. True to his word, Kade arrived the next morning with a wagon full of cut firewood. He stacked it neatly near her cabin, refusing any offer of payment. Come to supper tomorrow night, he said as he was preparing to leave. Kade is planning something special, and she will have my hide if you do not come. Teresa agreed, knowing it was an excuse but not caring. She wanted to see them, wanted to be part of their warmth and easy companionship. The next evening, she arrived at the Xavier ranch to find Kate had indeed made something special. A roast with vegetables and fresh bread, with apple pie for dessert. They ate and talked and laughed, and Teresa felt the loneliness that had been her constant companion since her father's death finally ease. After supper, Kate conveniently remembered she had mending to do in her room, leaving Teresa and Kate alone. They sat by the fire, comfortable in the silence. "Kate is not very subtle, is she?" Teresa said with a smile. "Not even a little bit. I apologize if she made you uncomfortable." "She did not. I like spending time here with both of you." Kate turned to look at her. "I like having you here, more than like, if I am being honest." Teresa's heart started beating faster. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day I found you stranded on that trail. I am saying that when you drove into the yard yesterday, it was like the sun came out after weeks of clouds. I am saying that I think I am falling for you, Teresa Zimmerman, and I do not know what to do about it." Teresa stared at him, her mind reeling. "We barely know each other. I know, and if you think I am crazy, just say so. But I have never felt this way about anyone before, and I think you feel it too." She did. God help her, she did. "I feel it," she whispered. "But I am scared. I came here to build my own life, to be independent. I do not want to lose myself in someone else." Kade reached for her hand, his touch warm and strong. "You would not. You are too strong for that, but who says you have to do everything alone? Maybe independence does not mean refusing all help. Maybe it means choosing who you let into your life." "Is that what you want, to be in my life?" "Yes." "If you will have me." Teresa looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, seeing the hope and vulnerability there. She thought about the past few weeks, the loneliness and the struggle, but also the joy she felt whenever she was here with him. She thought about her father, who had always told her that some chances only come once. "I would like that," she said. "Very much." Kade's face lit up, and he raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I promise I will not crowd you. You can keep your homestead, build your dream. I will just be here, helping when you need it, loving you the whole time." "Loving me?" Teresa's voice shook slightly. "Yes, I know it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love you, Teresa." Teresa felt tears prick her eyes. "I think I love you too. I did not want to, did not mean to, but I do." Kade pulled her closer, and she went willingly, letting herself sink into his embrace. He held her carefully like she was precious, his face buried in her hair. "We will figure this out," he murmured. "Together." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other by the firelight, until Kate came back in with a knowing smile and announced it was time for bed. Over the following weeks, Teresa fell into a new pattern. She spent her days at her homestead, working to improve the property, tending her small flock of chickens and preparing for spring. But several times a week, she would visit the Xavier ranch, and Kate would visit her. Slowly, carefully, her relationship with Kade deepened. He courted her properly, despite Kate's teasing that they were past such formalities. He brought her small gifts, a book of poetry from the general store, a set of wind chimes he had made himself, wildflowers when the first brave blooms appeared in late winter. They took long rides together across the desert, exploring the country and learning about each other. Teresa discovered that Kade loved reading but rarely had time for it, that he had a wry sense of humor once you got past his serious exterior, and that he had dreams of building his horse ranch into something special. He learned that she could shoot better than most men, that she had a beautiful singing voice she rarely used, and that she was fiercely independent but desperately lonely. They kissed for the first time on a cold February evening, standing by her cabin under a sky full of stars. It was sweet and tentative, both of them nervous, and when they pulled apart, Teresa saw the same wonder in his eyes that she felt. "I want to marry you," Kade said simply. "Not today, not tomorrow, but someday soon. I want you to be my wife, Teresa." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I want that too." They decided to wait until spring to give Teresa time to be sure and to let their relationship develop naturally. But in her heart, Teresa was already certain. Kade was everything she needed, steady and strong, but also gentle and supportive of her independence. With him, she could have both the life she had planned and the love she had not dared to hope for. Not everyone was happy about their courtship. Daniel Morris heard about it, probably from the gossip mill in Jackrabbit Springs, and showed up at Teresa's homestead one March morning. "You are making a mistake," he said bluntly. "Xavier is a small-time rancher with no prospects. I could give you more, much more. Sell me your land, marry me instead, and you will want for nothing." "Mr. Morris, I am not going to marry you, and I am not going to sell you my land. Please leave." "You are being foolish. What can Xavier give you? A hard life and no security." "He gives me love and respect, which is more than you are offering. Now leave, or I will get my rifle." Morris left, but not without a parting threat. "You will regret this, both of you." When Teresa told Kade about the encounter, his face darkened. "I do not trust him. He has a reputation for getting what he wants one way or another. What can he do? The land is legally mine." "I do not know, but we should be careful." They were careful, but nothing happened. Spring arrived, and with it came a burst of activity. Teresa planted her garden with seeds Margaret Parker had given her. Kade helped her buy 3 cows and a bull from a rancher who was selling out, the beginning of her herd. Kate helped her sew new dresses and curtains for the cabin. In April, Kade formally proposed, going down on one knee in Teresa's garden with a simple gold ring that had been his mother's. Teresa said yes with tears streaming down her face, and they set their wedding date for June, when the desert would be in bloom. The wedding was held at the Xavier Ranch, with the traveling preacher officiating and all their neighbors attending. Margaret Parker cried through the whole ceremony, and Kate was so excited she could barely stand still. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Kade kissed Teresa for the first time as her husband, everyone cheered. They had discussed where they would live, ultimately deciding to combine their properties. Teresa's homestead had better grassland and water access, while Kade's ranch had better buildings and facilities. They would keep both, using Teresa's place for cattle and Kade's for horses, traveling between them as needed. Their wedding night was spent at the Xavier Ranch, in the room Kade had prepared specially for them. He was gentle and patient, understanding Teresa's nervousness, and by morning she felt like she had truly become his wife in every sense of the word. The first year of their marriage was not easy. Combining 2 properties and 2 lives took work and compromise. There were arguments about money and decisions, times when Teresa's independence clashed with Kade's protectiveness. But they worked through it together, learning to communicate and trust. Kate continued to live with them, though she was growing up fast. At 17, she caught the eye of James Parker, and by the following year they were courting seriously. Kade grumbled about losing his sister, but Teresa could see he was pleased that Kate had found someone good. In the spring of 1875, Teresa realized she was pregnant. She told Kade one evening as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Kade went very still, then turned to look at her with wonder in his eyes. "Truly, truly." "In the fall, if I am calculating right." He pulled her into his arms, his voice thick with emotion. I love you so much." Their son was born in October, a healthy boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. They named him Carl, after Teresa's father, And Kade was a devoted father from the first moment he held his son. Life settled into a new rhythm. Kate married James Parker in a lovely ceremony and moved to the Parker Ranch, though she visited often. Teresa and Kade worked their combined ranches, slowly building up their herds and their reputation. It was hard work, but it was satisfying, building something together. Daniel Morris tried one more time to cause trouble, spreading rumors that Kade had cheated him in a horse deal. But the community knew them both too well by then, and the rumors went nowhere. Eventually, Morris gave up and moved on to easier prey. 2 years after Carl was born, Teresa had a daughter they named Catherine, after Kate. And 2 years after that, another son they called Michael. Their house was full of noise and laughter, of children growing and love deepening. On a warm June evening in 1880, Teresa stood on the porch of their home, watching Kade teach Carl how to rope a fence post while the younger children played nearby. 7 years had passed since the day her wagon broke down and a quiet cowboy had stopped to help. 7 years since he had fixed her wagon and told her to follow him home. She thought about that young woman she had been, alone and scared but determined to make her own way. She had done that, had built the life her father dreamed of. But she had also found something more, something she had not known she needed. She had found home, not in a place but in a person. In Kade and in the family they had built together. Kade looked up and caught her watching, and the smile he gave her was full of love and contentment. He said something to Carl and then walked over to join her, pulling her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About that day you found me stranded. About how my life could have gone so differently." "Fate," Kade said. "It was fate that put me on that trail that day, maybe, or maybe just luck. Either way, I am grateful for it, for you." He kissed her softly. "I am the grateful one. You made my life complete, Teresa. You and our children, this life we have built. It is everything I never knew I wanted." They stood together watching their children play as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The land was harsh and unforgiving, but they had tamed it together, making a home in the wilderness. They had their challenges still, would have more in the years to come. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything since that day on the trail. Kate and James came for supper that evening, bringing their own baby daughter. The house was full of family and noise and love. After the children were in bed, the adults sat on the porch talking and laughing, sharing stories and making plans. "Remember when you first came here?" Kate said to Teresa. "I was so excited to have another woman around. I knew right away you were perfect for Kade." "You knew nothing of the sort," Kade protested. "You were just excited to have someone to talk to." "I knew," Kate insisted. "I could see the way you looked at her even then. Like she was the answer to something you had been asking your whole life." Kade looked at Teresa, his eyes soft. "Maybe I was looking at her that way. Maybe Kate is right for once." "I am always right," Kate said smugly, making James laugh. Later, alone in their room, Kade held Teresa close. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up your independence to marry me?" "I did not give up my independence," Teresa said firmly. "I chose to share my life with you. That is different. And no, I have never regretted it, not for a single moment. Good, because I plan to keep you for the rest of my life." "That is acceptable to me," Teresa said with a smile and kissed him to seal the promise. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. They expanded their ranches, adding more land and more stock. Their children grew, Carl becoming a skilled horseman like his father, Catherine showing her mother's independent streak, and Michael developing a gift for working with his hands. When the railroad came through in 1883, bringing more people and more opportunities, Kade's horse breeding program finally gained the recognition he had worked for. His horses became known throughout the territory for their quality, and buyers came from as far as California to purchase his stock. Teresa started a vegetable garden that became famous in the area, and she began selling produce in Jackrabbit Springs, which had grown into a proper town. She also taught other ranch women her techniques, holding informal classes at her home. Kate and James had 4 children, and the cousins grew up together, spending summers moving between the ranches and learning the ways of the land. Margaret Parker passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1885, and her husband followed her 6 months later, their ranch divided among their children. Through it all, Teresa and Kade's love remained the foundation of everything they built. They had their disagreements, their difficult times, but they always came back to the promise they had made to each other that June day in 1874. They were partners in every sense of the word, building their life together day by day. In 1890, Carl married a girl from Jackrabbit Springs, and Teresa and Kade became grandparents for the first time when their grandson was born the following year. Holding the baby, Teresa marveled at how much her life had changed since that day her wagon broke down on a desert trail. She said as much to Kade that night as they sat on their porch, a habit they had maintained through all the years. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" she asked. "After you fixed my wagon, I told you to follow me home," Kade said, smiling at the memory. "Best advice anyone ever gave me," Teresa said. "Following you home was the smartest thing I ever did." "You made it a home," Kade said. "Before you, it was just a place." "You made it a home, Teresa. You and our children, our life together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. They were older now, gray threading through their hair, lines on their faces from years of sun and wind and laughter. But their love had only deepened with time, growing stronger and more precious with each passing year. "I love you," Teresa said, as she had said countless times over the years. "I will always love you." "And I will always love you," Kade replied. "From that first day until my last day, you have been and will be the love of my life." Their grandchildren grew, and then their great-grandchildren. The ranches prospered and expanded. The wild west of their youth slowly transformed into something more settled and civilized, but they adapted with the times while holding onto the values that had sustained them. Kate remained close, a constant presence in their lives until she passed peacefully in 1895, her family around her. Teresa grieved for the young girl who had welcomed her so warmly all those years ago, but she was grateful for the lifetime of friendship they had shared. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Teresa and Kade celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party, 3 generations of family filling the house and grounds. Looking around at everyone, Teresa felt her heart overflow with gratitude. That evening, after everyone had left and they were alone again, Kade took Teresa's hand and led her out to the porch. The desert night was beautiful, the sky blazing with stars. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For following me home that day. For taking a chance on a quiet cowboy you barely knew. For building this life with me. For giving me our children and this family. For loving me all these years." Teresa leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. "Thank you for stopping to help a stranded woman. For seeing something in me worth loving. For being my partner and my love through everything." They stood together under the stars, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that had exceeded their wildest dreams. The desert that had seemed so harsh and unforgiving had become their home, yielding its bounty to those willing to work for it and love it. In the years that followed, they slowed down but never stopped. They spent their days surrounded by family, watching new generations grow and build their own lives. They celebrated birthdays and weddings, mourned losses, and cherished every moment they had together. When Kade passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1905, at the age of 72, Teresa grieved but did not despair. They had been blessed with 31 years of marriage and a lifetime of love. She knew she had been given a gift that many people never received, a love that was true and deep and lasting. She remained on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still working in her garden and sharing her wisdom with anyone who asked. She told the story often of how she had met their grandfather, of the day her wagon broke down and a quiet cowboy had stopped to help. "He fixed my wagon," she would say with a smile. "And then he told me to follow him home, so I did, and I never looked back." Teresa Xavier passed away in her sleep in 1910, at the age of 79, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Kade had created. She was buried beside her husband on a hill overlooking their ranch, the land they had loved and worked and built their dreams upon. Their descendants continued to work the land, generation after generation, always remembering the story of how it all began. With a stranded woman, a broken wagon, and a cowboy who offered help without expecting anything in return. A chance meeting that became a great love story, proving that sometimes the best journeys start with an unexpected detour and the courage to follow when someone says, "Follow me home."